Idiocracy, the rule by idiots. Idiocracy. How do idiocrats acquire their power? Idiocrats acquire their power through fictions, taking advantage of an innate human propensity to believe in social fictions. All right, what I was talking about. My first sort of walk into the fiery oven of idiocracy experience. I was working at a plant nursery. I was a plant expert. I was hired by defense over the course of 3 years, 3 different cases, 3 different defense attorneys. The story I'm going to share is with the second one. I'm going to do this fast because who knows when my wireless is going to go out again. But I was hired by this defense attorney. I had a court order. Walked into, what was that county? Burnett County? I don't remember. I walked into the, what was New Braunfels? It was near New Braunfels. Anyway, it's going to bug me that I can't remember the city, but maybe it's for the best. Walked into their police station with a court order to weigh evidence, felony evidence, in a felony prosecution of an individual that was caught growing cannabis in Central Texas. Now, in Texas, good old boy Republicans, they don't like that. They're looking for an opportunity to prosecute that anytime they get. But state law requires that a prosecution charge usable quantity versus a non-usable quantity. Why non-usable quantity? Because Texas had a history of hemp farming. And the town called Hempstead. So this kind of old Texas racism that's woven into their state drug laws made this distinction between usable quantities of marijuana versus unusable quantities. Marijuana is spelled with an H. So I had a court order. I had to walk in. I walk into this police station. They had this small meeting room that they told me to set up in. I brought my scales in. I set up a camera. I have the court order. And in walk the head of the police department, the chief of police, the police chief, the crime lab tech, 2, the lead narcotics detective, as well as another narcotics detective. And then I have the 2 arresting officers. So I'm in this small room with my scales and a camera, and these officers trying to intimidate me. They were trying to intimidate me. But if you're a government agent watching this, you should take note that I'm not easily intimidated. So I had these officers trying to intimidate me. They said, let's do this. Let's get this way analysis over with. I laid my court order on the table. I read it for them. So everybody in that room knew I was here acting on behalf of the defense with the approval of a court judge. So the head of narcotics gets the crime lab tech. They walk into this room that I'm supposed to do this analysis. They walk into this room with this brown paper bag. They set it on the table. I'm recording video from 2 cameras. And so I open the bag and it smells like fresh grass clippings. Like somebody mowed their lawn and threw the cuttings in the bag. That's a typical plant smell. That is the off-gassing of photosynthetic processes that I was smelling. And so I look around, I look at this bag, and I just kind of offhandedly say to the officers in the room that were trying to intimidate me, I just said, there aren't any flowers in this bag. And the chief of police, who's standing just over my shoulder, says, go on with it. Let's get this over with. So I'm like, okay. But I had it on recording, on camera, on audio recording. As soon as I open the bag and I look at it, and it's like, no, there are no flowers on this, in this. So I dump all the contents off the table. Now, by law, I'm supposed to measure this and determine the usable quantity from the non-usable quantity. And by law, there was no usable quantity in this bag. And so I made a note of it in the room with the recording to all the officers in the room. I'm going to weigh all the contents at once. There'll be no separation, which the chief of police even said that. After I read the court order, he said, there'll be no separation. I wonder if he knew. But anyways, to reiterate the point, I had the chief of police. I had the two lead narcotics detectives in the room with me. I had two of the arresting officers in the room with me. And I had the crime lab tech in the room with me as I'm doing this court-appointed weight analysis. And there's no flowers. And so I make a note. Now, they were getting nervous, and I could tell that they were getting nervous. And so what I did is I weighed all the contents. I got a weight, and my weight over two scales was 25% different than the weight that the police department measured and wrote on the side of the bag, because they had the police crime lab weight on the bag. My weight across two scales was 25% less. So I made a note of that too. And everything I'm recording, I'm taking notes, but I'm also saying it so the video captures it. Again, you can't intimidate me. I know how to cover my bases. So, okay, after being intimidated, these officers tried to intimidate me. And I made note of it. I'm a court-appointed expert witness to the defense. I'm making note of everything. So I walk out of that crime lab, and I immediately call the defense attorney that hired me. And I said, there is no usable quantity in this. He asked me to explain. And of course, I had asked the officers questions. I said, who is the officer that cut these down? Of course, the officers that cut the plants down, because he was growing cannabis, he was growing marijuana with an H, according to Texas state law. They were not in the room. Who knows where they were? But the two arresting officers were there. And so I was able to ask them, who cut these, when were these cut down? Why does it matter? Because they were cut down before they flowered. These cannabis plants that were being grown for marijuana were cut, the police cut them before they even flowered. And now they're charging this dude with a felony of a drug possession, drug cultivation, and intent to distribute. 3 felony charges over this weight, over this mass of non-usable cannabis, according to state law. So anyways, after that, I'm on the phone, and this is what I'm telling the defense attorney that hired me. They've got over 4 ounces, because that was the threshold for felony, over 4 ounces. They've got over thresholds of grass cuttings. But the police didn't quite know. I don't know the specifics of the case, but they were idiots. And when those cops were standing in that room trying to intimidate me, I was standing in a room of idiots, in an idiocracy, in a rule by idiots that acquire their power through fictions. And the fiction on that table, in that room, on that day, was that was a felony drug possession case. It was a complete fiction. And of course, I was quick to tell the defense attorney this. I spent a week writing a report. I compiled all the video evidence that I captured, every angle of the weight, the conversations, everything from the moment I hit record. The reading, the comments by the police as they tried to dissuade me from spending too much time looking at this. All of that went to the court. And I made my report. And when I submitted my report to the defense attorney, who gave another copy to the judge, the defense attorney calls me up about a week later, and he's like, the next court date is set for X date, and I think I'm going to put you on the witness stand to testify about this. And I said, okay, put me on that stand. I come bearing the truth. Well, it came up to the day before the court date, and I was ready. I had my report. I was ready to go. And the attorney called me and said, we're now going for a plea bargain. Because what I did exposed the idiocracy of the police in that case. I don't know the outcome of that case, but the client that hired me, that paid for me to do that, and I charged $100, which is nothing. Other experts might charge thousands of dollars. I wasn't there to profit off of this poor guy. I was just there to help. I was there to help take notes, analyze, take more notes, make a recording, and give it all back to a judge, ultimately. That was my first experience with idiocracy, the rule of idiots that acquire their rule power by fiction. So that guy wrote me eventually and thanked me for doing that. And for me, I was aware of the much bigger process of an imposed authoritarian kind of fiction rooted in the war on drugs. And I was ready to fight it back then. I did little spots here and there. I did that one other time before I moved to Colorado. And then literally like the week that I moved to Colorado, a fourth defense attorney called me and asked me for those same services. And I had about a 30-minute meeting over the phone. I said, I can't come down there. I live in Colorado for a reason. But I spent 30 minutes telling this defense attorney what to look for and how he could argue a case against what the prosecution was arguing. Again, related to this federal threshold of 4 ounces, ruled by idiocracy. I mean, that's just a microcosm. And I'm sure if there's anybody watching this, you might have your own experience with the idiocracy that may be more traumatizing and brutal than my kind of flippant story here. But idiocracy is ruled by fiction. Look at what the Republicans are hoisting to power. They are hoisting idiocrats to power. And their fiction is clear for anybody to see. We don't have to settle for a rule by idiots. Use the test to take the test. Use the idiocracy to take down the idiocracy. That's how I'm going to finish this.